Welcome back to the Explainer. So let's just dive right in, shall we? Have you ever walked away from a perfectly normal sounding conversation feeling, I don't know, completely drained or defensive or maybe even strangely obedient? Yeah, we've all been there. And it happens because everyday conversations, they're rarely just about the actual words being spoken. Right beneath the surface of our daily interactions, there's actually a hidden strategic control system running in the background. It's wild. And today, we're going to expose that whole system. We're going to break down the actual, literal code of communication, pulling directly from some groundbreaking models of human behavior. Basically, we're going to show you how to read the hidden matrix of human interaction. Let's get into it. So, it's a serious question. Are we really just exchanging words? Because, we love to think of communication as this simple transfer of data. Like, I say a fact, you hear a fact. We're just sharing information, right? Well, wrong. Actually, the fundamental illusion of human interaction is that we're just talking. The reality, and you'll see this in just a minute, is that every single conversation is really a negotiation for psychological control. And once you shatter that illusion, once you realize it's not just about sharing content, you can start to see this whole underlying interaction layer, the layer that actually dictates who holds the power in any given room. Section 1. The illusion of words. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at Eric Berne's classic model of human behavior. He outlined this in his famous work, Games People Play, and it introduces a massive paradigm shift. Here it is. Communication is not content exchange. It's state-to-state strategic exchange. That is absolutely huge, because whoever controls the flow of this hidden exchange, well, they ultimately control the psychological outcome of the entire interaction. Listen, power doesn't come from having the biggest vocabulary. No, power comes from the ability to force a specific psychological state upon the person you're talking to. And the crazy part? Half the time, they don't even realize it's happening. This entire framework, by the way, is known as transactional analysis. It's basically an interaction-level control system model. So rather than agonizing over the exact definitions of the words being used, like we usually do, this model analyzes which psychological state is actually speaking and which state is responding. Think about it like this. We're essentially treating human psychology here as a tangible, actionable operating system. If you know how the system processes inputs, you can predict and, frankly, even guide the outputs. Section 2. The core code, ego states. Right, let's look at the architecture of this code. Every single time you interact with someone, literally every time, you're operating from one of three states. Step 1 is the parent state. When you speak from here, you're reinforcing authority, hierarchy, rules. Think of that boss who always talks down to you, treating you like you're 5 years old. Then, step 2 is the child state. This one is driven by emotion, dependency, maybe the need for approval, or even rebellion. And finally, step 3 is the adult state, which is focused purely on accuracy, efficiency, and rational problem solving. Now, here's the catch. Each node has its own incentive structure. For instance, parent-to-child transactions are highly strategic for a manipulator. Why? Because they reward obedience and they reinforce these deep emotional dependency loops. But on the flip side, adult-to-adult transactions, those are the only ones that produce stable, non-manipulative reasoning. So notice how these states interact to form system dynamics. These are essentially the feedback loops of human interaction. First, we have complementary transactions. This is where the ego states match up perfectly. Like, if I ask you an adult question and you give me an adult answer, the communication just flows smoothly, it works. But then we have crossed transactions. This is the friction. It's when an unexpected ego state responds, and suddenly, boom, the system crashes. Conflict occurs. Let's say I ask you a purely adult question about a project deadline, but you respond defensively, coming from a child state because you feel attacked. When that happens repeatedly, we hit what's called a system collapse. All that adult-to-adult problem-solving completely vanishes, and it's replaced by these infinite, exhausting, emotional or hierarchical loops. Section 3. The exploit, hidden transactions. Okay, this is exactly where things get super dangerous, because once you understand this code, you start to see how manipulators exploit it to seize psychological power over you. It's honestly fascinating. We have this core tactic, the hidden transaction. On the surface, you've got the surface message. It uses perfectly rational, perfectly adult-sounding language. But underneath, there's the hidden message. That's the actual control signal being transmitted. A manipulator will use completely neutral words to mask a secret parent or child control signal. They are intentionally trying to bypass your rational evaluation and force you into an emotional or submissive reaction. The words say one thing, sure, but the psychological tone is entirely designed to trap you. So the absolutely crucial point is this idea right here. Most manipulation happens not in what is said, but in what ego state is being secretly targeted. I really want you to let that powerful realization sink in for a second. Seriously, think about a time in your life when a colleague or a boss or maybe even a partner said a completely mundane sentence to you, but it immediately made you feel small, or defensive, or just like a scolded child. Let me tell you, that wasn't an accident. Your child state was being secretly, surgically targeted right beneath the surface of those words. Section 4. The arena. Real-world power dynamics. Just look at how universally this code applies across all sorts of different high-stakes domains. I mean, this isn't just some theory for couples counseling. This is the underlying architecture of real-world power dynamics. Take financial trading, for example. A market panic creates child state emotional trades, and following supposed gurus blindly, that's just falling victim to parent state authority bias. The only way to actually survive in that environment is adult state disciplined execution. And in cybersecurity, it's the exact same matrix. A phishing attack doesn't hack a computer, it hacks the human by exploiting a child state emotional trigger, like fear or a false sense of urgency. Or the attacker might impersonate the CEO, exploiting the parent state. The only defense? Adult state protocol validation, just checking the checklist without the emotion. Even in the military, the command hierarchy leverages the parent state to prevent the child state panic under fire, which then allows the adult state to engage in real strategic planning. It's the exact same underlying interaction code, literally everywhere you look. Section 5. The Defense Protocol. So, the big question, how do we actually fight back? Now that we can see the matrix, we need a defense protocol to patch the vulnerabilities in our own communication systems. So here is your system defense logic. Step 1. You've got to detect the ego state being targeted before you even open your mouth to respond. Stop and ask yourself, are they trying to make me feel like a child right now? Step 2. Refuse the hidden framing. Simply do not accept the emotional or authority-based trap they just laid out for you. And step 3. Force a return to adult communication. You do this by maintaining steady, rational, fact-based responses. Listen, when you flat out refuse to shift out of your adult state, you completely disarm the manipulator's power. You lock the interaction safely into rational reasoning, and they lose their leverage. Section 6. A behavioral prediction heuristic. Now look, as much as I absolutely love this framework, to truly master any model, we have to maintain our intellectual rigor. We have to understand its limits. So let's talk about the model's blind spots. First off, human communication is incredibly complex, right? So reducing the entire human brain to just 3 states is, well, it's a massive simplification. It also tends to ignore the deep cultural and linguistic structures that shape how we talk to each other. Furthermore, if you take this stuff too literally, you risk developing this everything is manipulation bias, where you're constantly overanalyzing completely innocent comments. Modern psychology reminds us that these ego states, they aren't discrete on and off switches in the brain. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they are overlapping, highly context-driven activation patterns. So we really must remember that this is a highly effective pattern recognition tool for organizational behavior and, social engineering defense. It's a heuristic. It's a rule of thumb. It is not a literal map of your neuroanatomy. But hey, even with those blind spots in mind, the core lesson here remains completely undeniable. If we compress this entire explainer down into just one dominant pattern, it is this. Most social control comes from controlling which ego state the other person operates in. It's that simple. If they can force you into an emotional reaction, or if they can force you to submit to their unearned authority, they win. But if you can anchor yourself in the adult state, you retain your autonomy, your logic, and ultimately, your power. Which leaves us with one final, kind of unavoidable question to carry into your everyday life. Which ego state is the person you are talking to secretly pulling you into right now? I want you to think about that. The next time you find yourself in a conversation that just feels a little off, stop looking at the words. Look at the code. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep your adult state engaged out there. See you next time.